Thank you all for coming. This is our fourth in 4 events that we've been planning to educate ourselves and our community towards better waste to resource. Like to thank our sponsors, our endorsers right off the bat. The Land Trust is one of our best alliance partnerships going, and you can see the list of just the growing list of supporters that we have, and I think it's indicative. It's a testimony of the great idea that we have. It's a win-win for our community and every member of our community, and as you can see, our alliances, they get it. So thank you to our supporters. We'd like for you to recognize that what you're about to see it's our pitch in concept only. We are in feasibility phase of looking at the things that you will see up on screen today. We understand that the feasibility needs to be done before anything is built or we justify anything being built. We would like for you to follow with us on the concept, okay? We need an aerobic compost facility for our community. Somebody approached a couple of us about 2.5 years ago and said, we've been trying to get a compost facility for our island, and we've made a couple of runs at it and we've been unsuccessful. I remember being a part of that initial conversation and going, yeah, sure, whatever. And about a month into the research and the people that were stepping up to volunteer, it indeed is what we need. We need a compost facility for this island. And we would like to think about us stretching it. Let's look at ourselves as our own ecosystem, right? Obviously, our borders are defined. Everything comes and goes via ferry. We have our own aquifer. We like to say we're the perfect petri dish, okay? Indeed, we are. And arguably, our best resource is the intelligentsia, is the people that live here. Tremendous experts, tremendous, very dedicated people know what they're doing, and we would like to be able to mine them toward that. So if we recognize we are our own ecosystem, then let's think in terms of stretching that. We need an eco lab. We need a compost lab where we combine potentially multiple components to do a better job of flipping our waste to resource. And, Ms. Julia?
Okay. Let me back up just a little bit and say that, there we go. Today you're hearing from a number of the directors of Zero Waste Vashon. So Hugh Damlin started us out. I'm Julia Lakey. You're going to hear from Will Lockwood talking about the Waste to Garden project, and you're also going to hear from Bob Dixon. So we will be taking over different pieces of it.
Ms. Jane, to the mic, please. Oh, thank you.
So before launching into the mission, we seem to have the recycle rates up here, and probably the most exciting part, as you can see, from 2013 to 2015, we have doubled. Nice. So that's exciting as an island to know that we're doing that, and we have not doubled in population, so there are other things that work there. Yeah. That's good. And we're not going to drown you in data, so we're not going to spend a lot more time on that. You want to go ahead and advance it? What? Oh, well, I don't. We don't have the mission one up there, huh?
Oh, yeah, I got it from you. So.
Oh, is it at the end? Okay. So this is something that is best understood on our website. As you can see, you can't read through all of the pieces of this, but the main thing you want to note is that this is Vashon yard and food waste in the pilot that we worked on creating with King County Solid Waste, and as of October 1st, it will have operated for a full calendar year. And the main thing you want to look at is where those little columns are going, and they're climbing. And we've had quite a bit more waste, yard waste, green waste, the cuttings from our yards that are growing as we speak, than the county was expecting. So it's been really significant, and those of us in zero waste knew that.
We're currently over double.
Yes, we've been doubling what they were expecting. So that means lots of good things. Now, everything that's being collected is going off to Cedar Grove and being made into compost. And the loop that we want to complete as islanders is to be able to keep our green waste on Vashon and make a product out of it that enriches our own soil and our own gardens. So that's our goal, is to continue to work toward that. And then this bottom one just says customer visits. So again, you can see that varies some, but the overall tonnage continues to climb. Okay. One more thing? Oh, yes. So starting October 1st, thanks for the reminder, we move into not just a pilot phase, but King County has agreed to continue collecting yard and food waste. So what we've been doing is no longer in the what'll happen to it, it's going to continue. So that's very exciting to know that we've kind of proven ourselves and we're moving forward as a community. So we're going to take questions at the end, if that's all right. So if you can just hold on to those, we're going to make sure we have a question and answer time, and then whoever's best qualified to let you get a response to that. So anything else? Okay, next slide.
Excellent.
See any accomplishments? You want to move on into that?
Okay, you are here at our fourth event. One of our goals, or one aspect of our mission, is to educate ourselves and other islanders. So the first one was on aerating or having healthy soils. We had a wonderful time with Norm Baker and creating biochar, and Ken Miller's in the room, and he's also a biochar expert. We've explored anaerobic digesters, and now we're exploring the whole issue of compost. And we have Peter Ray here filming it, and this entire educational series is going to be condensed and available for people to go online and look at through Voice of Vashon, and I don't know what other resources, but our website, our zerowastevashon.org website, and our Facebook will make that clear when that's available. So thanks to Peter, by the way. Okay, so part of the issue there is then the transfer station improvements. And King County was very skeptical about this. They said, oh, we've surveyed Vashon, and in fact, staff from King County Solid Waste said that to me just 2 days ago. They said, we surveyed Vashon, and they didn't seem interested in participating. It's like, really? Okay. So we know from being in touch shoulder to shoulder with our island neighbors that there's a lot of interest and a lot of need. So we kept that focus, and we're pleased to see that happening. So both the recycle rate is going up, and the pilot food waste is increasing. And that was one of the reasons we asked the county for a year-long pilot, because we wanted to see what the seasonal differences are. You know, we all know when there's a big windstorm, then everybody's got the giant pile, or it's time for spring pruning, or whatever a pruning schedule is. But we wanted to see what happened over the course of the year, so we really advocated for that year-long pilot. And again, the numbers continue to come in, so King County's moving it from a pilot to a regularly established program. I think I will turn it over to Bob to tell us about the food waste drop-offs.
My name's Bob Dixon. I'm basically looking at food waste and its gathering. As you know, the food waste ends up at the transfer station. You have to go through the toll booth in order to get there. The price for a upwards 300 pounds is $12, and it's very real. I consistently take food waste and yard waste on one trip in there and stay below the $300 pound limit. It's not at all hard to do. We have 2 churches that are presently gathering food waste. What happens is when they have a Sunday service, they bring their food waste with them and leave it in the containers. I come back, or others come back and pick it up and take it once a week to the transfer station. It's possible that any one of you could do the same identical thing. It's not something that has to be done by the churches. An individual could just as well, on a different cycle, do exactly the same thing. If you're working in your garden and cutting up a lot of debris, you can put that aside and the food waste on another area and put the 2 of them together for a load. So don't think it's just something that the churches have to do. I think that we'll continue with this. We have some problem as far as King County is concerned in the identification of food waste, because right now it's mixed between food waste and yard waste. We'd like to get that food waste separate, controlled, so that it can then be identified as a function of an aerobic digester. And that has not occurred in the way we're operating today. Other than that, I'm only asking that you enlist and remember the most important thing you can do is to compost. Be that in your own garden, be that in the food waste that we're taking to the transfer station, or we're also examining another possibility for food waste, and that's bokashi, which is another function of zero waste Vashon, to evaluate that possibility as well. So that's basically where we are on food waste. Turn it over to Will Walker.
Thanks, Bob. This is one of many areas where we could actually use some voluntary help. We hear that Gold Beach is creating a communal drop-off for food waste, yard waste. So we can expand this voluntary thing to be happening all across the island. Then the next item that we'd like to use, we'd like to get Will to talk about a really great project that he's had happening. This is our first year with Waste to Gardens, and it's a great demonstration of what we can do with proper compost.
It kind of looks like the Big Hat Project when I opened that slide.
Hi, thanks for coming. So the Waste to Garden project is to explore and test the benefits of compost. And so just a little talk here about just some of the benefits of compost that we were looking for. Compost added to the soil immediately improves moisture retention, and that's with sandy soils, but also with clay soils. And it reduces erosion and runoff and the leaching of nutrients from the soil, which then heads into our streams. We want to keep it in the soil available for the plants. It increases the carbon content of the soil, and carbon is one of the essential building blocks of carbohydrates, etc., like that plants feed on and microbes feed on and transferring in the soil. So that increases the nutrient value of the soil. What we found in this project, and it does a phenomenal job of breaking down clay soils, which are very difficult to work with, and it does it quickly. And it reduces the need and use chemical fertilizers, which is, we're totally trying to get away from that and have as much food produced organically as possible. So here's just a brief rundown of types of composting that you may or may not be familiar with. You're certainly familiar with the home stuff that we do, like that, whether a compost bin, piles, yard waste piles. And commercially, this is done on a large scale with windrows. We have special equipment that turn it and keep it aerated to stir it and also keep moisture correct on it. Anaerobic agility, you'll hear us talking about anaerobic. Anaerobic means without air. Aerobic means with air. So anaerobic, probably the most common example you all know is our septic systems, which work anaerobically. But bokashi, which is a Japanese and Korean method of composting, works anaerobically without oxygen, using lactobacillus bacteria. Anaerobic digesters, you'll hear us talk a little bit about, which are a closed system that essentially captures the methane off of it. And essentially it's like a commercial cow's stomach, like that, where you can capture the gas, use that for fuel, and you capture the nutrients, et cetera, off it. And then afterwards you have a digestate, which can be a soil amendment. And most people don't think about it, but basically worm bins are anaerobic digesters too. The anaerobic digestion is occurring in the gut of the worms. But these are all just examples that you'll hear us talking about of different types of composting. So residential, very familiar stuff. I just put this link down there if you're looking for creative ways to build compost bins and all different things. Compost bins don't have to be expensive. They don't have to be high-tech. You can just take a 3-foot diameter circle of mesh and start putting stuff in there, layering it like that. You will get compost out of it. So there's lots of different examples. They all work to more or less degree. It all depends what you want. We have a rotating bin at home that has a crank handle on it and a worm bin. And then we also have large yard waste bins, and they all work. So I encourage you, no matter what size yard you have, you do. A bokashi system can even work in your kitchen because it's working anaerobically. It doesn't have any smell. It's something where basically you're putting this bokashi powder on it and then putting the lid on it. And when you lift it up and you go put in more garbage in it, it smells like a sort of a sweet vinegar. And it has none of that sort of sulfury smell of garbage. Like that's quite remarkable. Okay, so commercial aerobic composting. And this is sort of what we're looking toward bringing on island. Maybe not to this scale, but the process is essentially the same regardless of the scale. And that is basically taking the yard waste and putting on into piles, mixing different components so that you get the right nitrogen balance, green compost versus brown leafy compost, and keeping it aerated and moist enough so that it gets very hot. It essentially bakes itself and creates this marvelous, breaks down these leafy components into things that are readily plant available. Right now, why compost an island? Well, right now, we're easily producing 3 tons per day of yard waste feedstock, and we could easily double that because many, many people have yard waste piles at home that are just too large for them to, or they don't have a truck, or they're basically, the yard waste station at the transfer station only takes up to 4-inch. Well, what about, 6-inch? What about a foot? You need a large grinder to do that. The dirt yard had one of those and actually worked fairly successful. This was down in Island Center. So we know it can be done. And it basically, if we do it, the elimination of the carbon footprint from trucking is gigantic. You're talking thousands and thousands of dollars worth of fuel, thousands of dollars of expense. And it's something where you're shipping it off an island only to truck it back, which is almost madness. So costs are greatly reduced for all parties involved. We'll get a cleaner, higher quality product here because essentially we control the inputs and the outputs. We can use it to improve island soils, whether it's in your home gardens or that, and it's going to employ people. It's definitely, and it's going to be more profitable for the people that actually use this, landscapers, etc. So there are issues. It's not a perfect thing, and we sort of need to balance these things out. There is the potential of contamination. If anybody's gotten Cedar Grove contests, they've gotten pieces of plastic showing up in it, and they've got sometimes a stinky load versus a nice smelling load. And it's because they're a very large operation. They've got people sneaking garbage into it, sneaking stuff that shouldn't be in there. We have a much more tight control of that. Compost needs odor and runoff control. If it's purely yard waste compost, it's really sweet smelling. It's not bad at all. Once you introduce food to it, then you start getting into putrefaction and smell issues like that. So what we're proposing is keeping the food separate from the green waste, just keeping yard waste and chippable wood down into it and not getting that commingled with. There's other processes that can do that and control the odor, like anaerobic digestion. Location's important. You need a large amount of area to do this, and you need zoning to all comply with this. One possible feasible site is the borrow pit at the transfer station, which is idle land, but that's going to take a partnership and extension with King County. It's an expensive investment. When you get into the equipment, the land, the permitting, the sheds and everything like that, you're probably talking a couple $1 million here to get it done correctly. Marketing is also going to be important. I mean, how do we sell this stuff, wholesale or retail? Is it bagged or not? Do you have to show up with a pickup truck? Undecided. These are all things the community needs to decide. And then transportation. We have plenty of people that are landscapers that can truck it to your house if you need that. That's not the problem. But we have a lot of large yard waste piles sitting at people's houses that they can't get off, so they push it into the ravine or they burn it. So having a service that could service that part of stuff would be a great help to the community. And maybe we do a twice a year yard waste pickup, something like that, where you have an excavator following, with a dump truck, and you pay them $100 to take it. My yard alone, I've only got 2 acres every winter from downfall. I mean, it's like an 8-foot tall pile, but it's this huge pile, and that's just stuff the wind blows down. So it's a service we need, and we need to decide how to manage that. Okay, so getting on to the Waste to Garden project. The Waste to Garden project is composting in action. We decided, okay, we're going to test this. We're going to see how well compost works on you can't even call it soil, it's just dirt. It was clay, dirt. Basically, it's a fill dirt. Here's an explanation of essentially, what we are intending to do. And it's an exploration, it's a scientific exploration of looking into things that potentially are available on island. And seeing basically what kind of growing results we get when we compare with or without, or side by side with each other. Last year did a test using Carpintero potting mix, just in pots with various amendments and testing, and we got some interesting science out of it, and that made us to go ahead with phase 2 to try this out on a large scale and see how it works out. So the goals basically are to see which available local amendments, or at least producible on island. I got the compost from off island this year, but it's something we can produce on island, and to see which one works best here. And then to try them, we were also exploring biochar, because if we have a large woody waste, we can ship that and turn this into biochar. And I'm not going to get into an explanation of biochar. If you really have heavy questions on that, there's a guy right there that you want to talk to about it. But biochar is essentially charcoal in a specific form, cooked at a specific temperature. It has some very unique properties. For one, it's a great microbial home, and microbes are essentially what makes plants grow. The interchange of microbes feeding to the garden. The soil is more alive than the plants you put on top of it. So we did soil testing at the beginning of it, tested it like that. I just sent the soil samples out now at the conclusion of this year's harvesting like that, and we're waiting for the results to come back. And we're going to track this. This is a 3-year project that we'll be watching essentially how these amendments work over time. Okay, So the site is behind the IGA and Granny's Attic. It's in the Vashon Maury Community Food Bank site. It is a 40 by 60 garden, pretty much a home-sized garden, not very big. It's basically all the dirt there is fill soil. It was brought in by the dump truck loads in the 70s. It is horrible soil. It's got bricks in it. It is rocky as hell. When we looked at this stuff in the spring, we went, oh no, this is, we're setting ourselves up for failure. It's acidic, quite acidic, pH 5.5. It's very low in nutrients, base nutrients, very high in natural minerals, which is typical of a clay soil. Very high, that was sort of the promising sign of it. And to their credit, the food bank had done 2 cover crops on it, which have helped by their tilling that into it. Unfortunately, sitting beneath the soil, 18 inches beneath it, is the original Japanese gardener soil like that, which is gorgeous. But they haven't done cover crops that can reach down, way down into that and pull those nutrients up. So we're going to probably be doing our cover crops in this area with those kind of crops, some that will be pulling from various depths far down to essentially self-enhance the soil. So we made these baseline adjustments to the 2,400 square feet, added lime to raise the pH up to 6.5. Bone meal was added for phosphorus, which was low. The potassium content was reasonably good. Added 7 cubic yards, which is a lot of compost, to that 2,400 square feet. But this is sort of like, taking the paddles and jump-starting the patient. So we basically, we didn't fool around here like that. We just said, okay, because the organic matter was quite low on it. It was sitting around 4%. So we wanted to get it up to around 8% before biochar was added. And then the test garden was divided into 9 rows, 1 meter wide by 10 meters long. The layout basically, 9 rows. The first 6 rows were amended in 4 randomized blocks, and I've got a diagram that'll kind of explain this afterwards. But the randomized blocks are so that you're not putting the same amendment all across the top or bottom or middle thing. You're doing it in random locations so that if there's a variability in soil, and it turns out there is, one dump truck load was different than the next one, that you average out these variabilities. The amendments in the scientific part are no amendment, just the baseline amendments that I showed before. Nitrogen fertilizer in the form of blood meal. Biochar, just biochar with a compost base, and then biochar plus the blood meal. And 3 of the rows were planted in potatoes, 3 were planted in green beans. The last 3 rows of the 9 were planted in onions and tested with various amendments, and these were like an A-B comparison with and without biochar. So, there's, basically things like wood chips, with or without biochar, down-to-earth starter mixes, which is a commercial organic fertilizer, Bokashi tea, Tagro, worm castings, and Okara from Island Spring Tofu Factory. And the layout was like this, so you can see. And these are sort of A and B with wood chips, and with wood chips and biochar, the organic fertilizer, and then with biochar. So everything's an A-B comparison here. These are the randomized blocks. So you can see this was in unamended here, and then unamended here, and then unamended here, so that we averaged out what we saw. So basically, here's where a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I think you can't stress this enough. Basically, a healthy soil is the single most important foundation of a viable, sustainable food system. And basically, on my son's right, on our left here like that, that's the original soil. That's what we're working with. If you squeeze that, it forms a lump that will not come apart. It's like working with Play-Doh. And when it rains, it just turns into a slick. On the right side, that's just, I dug that up yesterday like that. That's the compost amended biochar, there is biochar in that soil too like that. You can squeeze it and it forms a nice friable ball. When it rains on it, the rain goes right into it and percolates into it, doesn't sit on the surface, doesn't create a slick like that. And when you dig in it, it's just gorgeous digging already. Now this is just after 1 season. And everything we did wrong because we started in spring. We added the compost in spring, we added the lime in spring, and the biochar in spring. This all should have been done in fall, but due to contracts being worked out and everything else, we had to start in spring. So this is the worst case scenario. So, getting on to the results. In a word, some of the results were spectacular. They're over the top. So we basically got 305 pounds of potatoes, 135 pounds of green beans, and 195 pounds of onions. The quality of the produce out of it was just gorgeous. I mean, we had very, very few diseased potatoes. No problems with the onions, and the green beans had we had towards the end. It looks like we had a bad dump truck load of food towards the one end of the field, and the green beans kind of suffered at that end, and they sort of skewed the averages. But so now this year I'm testing specifically that end to see what was in there. Is it nutrient deficient? What is in there? But this will give you a visual comparison. The onions on the right, on your left there, like that, are good, normal-sized onion. That's what I get in my home garden. That's what I expect like that. And basically that's, grown in normal like that. I'm very, very happy to get those. The one on the right, they're softball size like that. And we got those with the worm castings and with the Tagro soil. And they weren't just one or two like this. They were all like this, like that. It's absolutely astounding, the results like that. So there are some soil amendments that are jump ahead of others, and the interesting thing with worm castings is that something, again, with our food waste and like that we could very easily produce here on island. It's a matter of getting it, and we had someone doing it, but it takes a little more work in getting the marketing together, but it is something that we could definitely do on island.
Showing that picture, that would make a big difference.
So, just to conclude here, I just want to give special thanks to the Community Food Bank for the cooperation. They're learning from us and they're extending our model into their other soils. They're seeing the same kind of response, which is great. So overall, the Community Food Bank is really benefiting from this nicely. Vashon Thriftway for the land and partnership on this. Vashon Ace Hardware for donations and the fencing and stuff like that. Kathy donated, for the onions. We had some really good island scientists that really helped set up the protocols for this, and we'll be tracking and analyzing the results, and off-island scientists also. And then a whole lot of people volunteering, just wonderful help. And this will be continuing and going on again into next year. So if you like gardening, it's real relaxed, it's easy. We try to have enough people so nothing is onerous. And the second year is always easiest.
Pretty cool.
At the end.
Yeah, can you hold off? That'd be great. Okay, more information on compost. Okay, once again, a typical compost works with both yard or green waste and wood waste in combination. Visited a couple of relatively small scale aerobic compost facilities in my native state of Virginia. And you can see that the bottom describes the pieces of the facility. You can see that it's science. It's not rocket science. It's what our ancestors have done. And there's still a heck of a lot of questions to be answered. But we've got a heck of a lot of answers. We've got a lot of answers. So let's utilize it. But I mean, really, this particular facility just had the tools down below that you see. And you can see it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. A truck goes, picks up the canisters from both businesses and residences, and the compost process starts. This one, these are windrows, which are a pretty typical system by which you organize rows, and then with the right machine you're able to turn them. If you just look, you can see the machine right there, which is this big mouth of a worm or something, and it turns periodically. These get turned, I believe, something like 4 times a week on average. Inside here, the owner encouraged me to put my hand in. He said, "How hot is that?" And I said, "Well, it's getting up there. It's maybe 100." And in 90-degree Virginia, that's not impressive at all. It was just a little bit warmer than the air. And he said, put your hand 18 inches in there. So I put it in the elbow, and it was hot, hot, hot. I could not leave it in there. So that was a classic compost in process working well. The other, besides the windrows, another typical form of composting is to create these corrals and provide aerobic help. There's a pipe system underneath these particular rows, and they periodically cut on these generators that push air into the bottom, and then it slowly but surely seeps up to the top. So back to the world of trash as it's related to Vashon. This is where we were literally last year, before we added the food waste, yard waste collection at the transfer station. And you can see, by and large, other than recycle, it's all wasted. This is what we can do with adding that community compost arm. I think that's pretty dramatic. That's the potential. Okay, so we're going to head into this concept of not just a compost, an aerobic compost facility, but a compost lab, where we may be able to, as Will said, match up anaerobic digestion and bokashi and reuse and to do a better job, because in general, food waste is not the best thing to go into aerobic composting. So here are some of the possibilities that we could potentially feed. We call them feedstocks that would go into portions of this compost lab. And you can see on the right side, that's a perishable product. The trick is, how do we utilize that product? 70% of the energy that's used in a compost facility is in the form of heat. Okay, so hopefully we can find a way to provide heat exchange and heat a high school
Or greenhouse.
I'm sorry?
Or greenhouse.
Yes, or greenhouses, absolutely. And a little bit of this is redundant on Will's points, but it really bears reinforcing, because all the way down the line you can see how that helps our community in so many ways. I personally really like the reinforces our community fabric. What we are proposing here is that we use environmental economics to our favor, and we focus on our island to do just that. What is environmentally the best we can do with our waste, okay? And we provide a facility to do it. Hit me. Okay, concentrate on this down here, okay? Because that pretty much says it all. What we're talking about is the potential to put in 3 main feedstocks and process them in potentially 3 major components, 3 main ways, and produce that kind of product. So in an ideal world, large wood waste, as in like stumps, as in wood that's 2-3 inches, something that you'd ordinarily grind, could potentially be, is a good feedstock to create biochar. Food processing waste, and we have, we've got a tofu factory on our island. We've got Seattle Distilling. We've got Cliffs Beer. We've got Vashon Island School District. We've got Vashon Community Care Center that produces 2 cubic yards a week of food waste. We've got some things to work with. That, by and large, makes sense to go into an anaerobic digester, as Will said, one big bad stomach, okay? And that produces more of the same. It also really helps to mitigate the amount of greenhouse gas associated with typical rotting, okay? We can harvest that big greenhouse gas and turn it into renewable natural gas literally with all three of these components we're talking about here. And then yard waste, what we've been focusing on, makes sense in aerobic compost, in that process. So that's it. That says it all. Here's a diagram of basically how biochar works and how it helps to complete that life cycle. On your right side, you can see a typical carbon cycle. Most of it is dissipated in CO2. Biochar helps to mitigate that and create 50% of the carbon going back into our soil, which is a tremendous nutrient. So it's a catalyst for so many things that can happen into our soil. And there are other products associated with it. Another product that we didn't list there, something called wood vinegar. Much like our ancestors used to use vinegar, and we use vinegar to knock out our dandelions where we want to knock them out. Wood vinegar is a really good natural pesticide, herbicide? Herbicide, thank you. Okay, so we've already covered the potential feedstocks for anaerobic digestion. This is a simple diagram of how it works. Basically, you put the food waste in, you have this usually a two-cylinder digester that anaerobically, as in you don't expose it to air, the anaerobic microbes are encouraged to grow and process this food waste into raw compost and into gas. That methane gas that comes off of there is a real big potential energy boost for every community. So, in wrap up, you can see what we should be looking at as what actually goes to Cedar Hills, our King County landfill, the percentage versus what we have to work with, and therefore the potential of what, if we process it right, what we can turn into absolute benefit for our community. Back to this, and Miss J, if you would pull it together for us, I'd appreciate it.
You can go to the next slide.
Okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what we've been exploring today is the main aspect of our mission, the ability of processing our organic waste streams into a sustainable resource. Completing the loop right here on Vashon. Continuing that partnership with King County and the community. So you've seen what we've done in a couple of years of being a young organization. We need community support, we need community energy. You can see that we're focused on projects. We don't just sit around and wonder. We really look at trying to apply science and see what to do. Because I think we've all been on committees where we get pretty impatient. So we do have a very strong action component, but we're based on carefully looking at the variables and proceeding in the best way forward that we can. So this remaining time, we'd like to invite you to come up with... Huh? Oh, there's one more slide.
It's
Okay.
Jim. You couldn't be here.
Okay, that's right. We had one other board member, Jim McCrae, who couldn't be here. Okay,
So he passed on these few thoughts.
yeah, so just to recap, we've had a recycling compost facility that had participation and perhaps could be resurrected in some form as long as it meets county standards.
You mean how was big? I mean, the dirt yard?
It was
The dirt yard, right, the dirt yard, which was down off the Violet Center. Our Waste to Garden project is a prime example of what we can do with island soil and island effort and amendments that weren't developed locally, but we could develop those amendments locally. And that's an operation that can be scaled to our farmers that are here, to look at the land trust They just have this huge Matsuda farm. They have to decide what to do with all that land. It needs enriching. It's just been a meadow for decades and decades. That soil is really impoverished right now, and it needs to be resurrected. And we have the resources and are moving toward the know-how to be able to put things in place that can resurrect island soil. So we have the data and the expertise to produce a viable, feasible study on the ramifications of an island compost facility, and we can always use volunteers. So we want to finish up with time for questions, let you know that there's a sign-up sheet in back where you can join our newsletter. We have both a website and a Facebook presence, so you can be involved in that. We have a board of directors, and then we have working groups that come out of that. And you saw in action how much work came out of the Rista Garden project. So at this time, I'd like to just turn it over to questions, comments, ideas that are popping for you, and somebody from our board will respond. So I know you had one.
I just had a question about the yield from your experiment. And I mean, you showed the beautiful size of the onions. Did they taste different?
Yeah, they taste good. We fortunately didn't get to taste a lot of them because we gave it to the food bank. The green beans were super sweet. I mean, they're like candy. The potatoes, I did snitch a few and made a batch of mashed potatoes with them. They're absolutely perfect. I mean, it's my first time using these potatoes, so I've never used this breed. They were Santina's, but they turned out to be just awesome potatoes. And the onions, yeah, we've used them and they came, I mean, there was nothing, they weren't watery, they were nice and solid and like that. Now, what I don't know with those giant ones, for example, will they keep as well as the smaller ones? I don't know. Okay, so yeah, but they were like Walla size.
Wow.
Question?
So for those of us who are out of this loop about food waste, evidently are they collecting food waste at the recycling center?
Here on Vashon, you can, yes, you can go
And
back to the yard and food waste area.
quantities?
What?
Oh, in what quantities? I mean, I have a little worm bin at home, and I have about a small bag of wheat that I put in my worm bin, and I hardly amass 300 pounds.
Right.
I mean, that's ridiculous.
I know.
But-
So that's why we're exploring as a community individual solutions. So your worm bin, the bokashi, all the way up to community solutions. And so
So
we
there's-
have facilities like the care center that have many people
Yeah.
living there, and so
Yeah.
that's
Oh, I
generating a lot.
understand that,
So
but for me currently, there really is nothing.
there's,
right now.
right, and we
Yeah.
continue
Okay.
to talk to King County about
I
that.
understand.
That to make it a minimum charge of $12
As a
is a
former
hardship.
resident of Seattle who had my little waste compost bin picked up every week, that's not gonna happen. Yeah,
Well,
and I can't
the
even,
problem is we're not incorporated. We don't have a government. So
yeah.
there's nobody that can kind of top down and say, you will collect your
Well,
area. You will do that.
I don't expect that, but I wondered if there might be an option for me to take it to the recycling center the way that I can take my.
The best option right now is to get together with your neighbors, and kind of like form community groups.
Uh-huh.
We have heard at the Strawberry Festival, we've heard from the community repeatedly. Ideally, we'd love to have a bin, like at the thrift or something like that, we can put that there. And we're working on King County on this like that, but right now, unless we
Yeah.
finance it ourselves, it doesn't exist.
Right.
I have a little Honda Pilot. I'm gonna be trucking through
200 pounds,
compost
right.
anywhere. So
Well, but
I'll
the
just
church
continue
ones are
my
taking
work.
100 pounds a week
Yeah.
from that community, and they're doing it in all different
Yeah.
sized vehicles. There's
Yeah,
nothing too
that's
specialized about that,
wonderful.
so, yeah.
Could you tell us who the church groups are, and maybe some of us could bring our stuff over to them?
Okay, the two church groups are at the Episcopal Church across from the Care Center and the Methodist Church. And food has to come in the little bio bags that you buy from our retailers here. And it can only be dropped off on Sundays for all of the reasons you can imagine. imagine. You know, you leave it early and what is growing in it by the time it gets delivered on Sunday.
We're very open if more churches want to join into this, because once we've got the truck out, I mean, if more churches want to do this, we can cooperate with them and help at least, you know, to pick up and transport.
But I think just to go to another church, for instance, I'm sort of with the Unitarians, I don't want to go until I can see it happening, say, at the Methodist church. You know, I'd like to visually.
Yeah, well,
So-
yeah, get in touch with Bob
So
Dixon if you
having-
want, and you can,
Having
Yeah, participate
a
in
role
that,
model,
yeah.
that's really great.
yeah,
All right, can I play devil's advocate or not?
certainly. We
Okay.
want everything
Okay.
checked out there.
All right, so I live on 4 acres. I have a worm bin. I don't want to give you my food compost because I want it to make my own lunch. I have sheep. I don't want to give you my sheep manure because I want it to enrich my grass. I recycle my own humanures, which I use for my horticulturals. And my yard waste, I could possibly give you some of my yard waste from the storms, etc. But I don't have a truck. So I really want to help you. I think what you're doing is fantastic. But there we are.
Well,
So can someone answer me?
we have the same situation today, so I don't contribute food waste, we compost everything. We don't do that, and we do, so we're very, very similar. You've got twice as much acreage, but it's, that's fine.
Yeah,
Local
if
composting
we
is
had
fine.
people doing this on the scale that you're talking about, we probably wouldn't be the organization we are.
Right.
But I've had people come to me saying, I'm such a composter that I am freezing my food waste. I don't see a program on Vashon. I commute to Seattle. I carry my frozen food waste and I drop it into the bin at work. And I think that is amazing and crazy at the same time. You know?
But
So
maybe this is why King County couldn't find anyone that was interested in composting.
well,
The other thing that we're doing is we're offering you alternatives.
right.
You now have a choice other than burning. You can take your invasive species to the transfer station. Hopefully you can take your food waste someplace else. I don't believe in individually putting meats and chicken and all sorts of things into my compost bin. So I can now take it to a church and hopefully other places. So I think that's really the underline of responsibility of a community compost facility.
But, you know, we're evolving in different new projects, so there's people that volunteer and work for us that live in apartments and can't compost at all like that. There's people that have farms, and so this Waste to Garden project, I mean, was all volunteer work, you know, so there's opportunities outside of that, and maybe you even have ideas that we haven't thought about. But your final comment about not having a truck is universal. We hear that frequently. And ideally, in a perfect world, I'd like to see it financed or with a grant or something like that, a biannual pickup on island that basically has a trucking dude, and we pay a fee to have it come and picked up. And in large quantities, good-sized dump truck will take 10, 12 cubic yards. So that's a large quantity.
Find a dedicated young'un, and we'll help get that person's small business loan to get a truck, hopefully electric operated, that will service you. There's a job.
One more comment. I live on the beach and we have things wash up like pressure treated lumber and stuff. You know, just have to cut it up and put it in the trash. And just, I leave the good stuff on the beach, but there's a lot of bad stuff that washes up on the beach that I try to get rid of.
Yeah. We will still have a flow to the landfill.
I was just curious with the worm guy, what happened to his facility? Do you guys know?
Yes.
What, Tanner?
He gave it a good shot for
Yes.
many years.
Mike Hilton.
Yeah.
Yes, he determined that he either had to dramatically increase the volume or it wasn't worthwhile. And he would find good-hearted folks that would put up with his worms in their barns for 2 or 3 years, basically rent-free, and then the farm would be sold, so he'd have to move elsewhere. So he was operating on a shoestring budget.
Yeah, but
And
is
his
the
worm
facility
sifter-
still there, or?
Amy, his worm sifter is for sale.
That's
so-
what I was, yeah.
But
So
yeah.
that's like on the island, because I saw the operation, you know, when he was
But
kind of full swing.
Imagine, if you will, if we could basically take all our food, stuff like that, to say the Matsuda farm, and there's a shed there, and all that's provided there. So that essentially, this is a one-stop, you know, easy, no charge, you just bring your stuff through there, drop it off.
Yeah, and it's for sale.
It's for sale.
Does King County know that?
I don't know.
I mean, it's just like, that seems like such a resource, you know, and anyway.
How about that
Just
chipper
curious.
you were talking about? Is that still on the island?
I'm sorry?
That chipper you were talking about?
Yes, and it's unused.
Whoa.
Yeah, we've got a couple of folks that chip hourly wage, but every time I call them, they go, "Oh, I'm too busy. I can't deal with you for 2 or 3 months."
Yeah.
So, another job.
That's right. Okay.
Who's the largest contributor to the green waste in the landfill?
Well, our island landscapers are, yeah. And they are pretty happy with the system. Other than one of them has a really large truck and there was some difficulty getting the staff amenable that it wouldn't get damaged backing up there. So, yeah, the landscapers are really doing well being able to bring the yard waste there.
So are there 2 different driveways? How do they pay, how does it work in terms of, when you drive in with your truck, and how do they know what's in the truck? I mean,
You identify it at the waste station itself.
you just go in and you say, I have land waste, I have yard waste.
I have yard waste, right, and they give you a special stick.
And then
or
there's
whatever.
2 different driveways at the other end, one goes here, one goes there.
It's right before the garbage dump off, there's a Quonset hut, that shed that they form, you
So
dump
it's
there
very
instead
clear.
of into the pit.
Right.
Uh-huh.
So you dump there and then go back through and they weigh you again,
Mhm.
just like they do for the landfill.
You tell them at the station where you pay that it is yard waste that you have or food waste, and you end up with a green card, and if you say garbage, you end up with a white card. So they know the difference between the 2 things. So all your yard waste and food waste goes in the Quonset hut, and your garbage goes to the pit where you dump your load in for hauling off the island.
And we didn't actually talk about it in our slideshow, but there's going to be an upcoming article in the Beachcomber, and because of the installment of those compactors, King County is making much fewer trips with our recycling, so it's a huge savings of greenhouse gases and fuel and all the things that we need to protect and minimize.
They calculated last year, they saved $140,000 in fuel fees last year.
Can't they shoot that back to us to buy?
Email them and tell them we want our money. That's a good point.
That makes
They
sense.
should.
It does, it does.
You
And that,
all have done this great work of setting it up so that they can
Yeah.
say.
As we make the case to King County, and we're starting to work on actual numbers and like that, this
Okay.
becomes sort of a underlying
So
number.
you have to wait till you kind of.
Yeah, and to make the most balance, so those sort of numbers are important.
Yeah.
King County,
Great point.
we all know how King County can be. They can be slower than, thank you. But to their credit, they continue to step up and listen to our repeated complaints advocating for our community. But to their credit, they stepped up with this pilot. And that's partly because we convinced them to get a compactor. And we convinced them to start commingle instead of continuing to separate. So with that comes credibility. And I think that's one of the reasons that we've gotten, directly or indirectly, 3 grants from King County to help us, $1,000, $5,000. In the case of, there's a separate grant associated with Impact Bioenergy, which is an anaerobic digester business in Seattle. And they're doing a feasibility study about our community as far as food waste, how much feedstock potentially is available for anaerobic digestion. So there's, to their credit, they not only listen, but they're starting to act. And the more they act, the more they realize that it's a win-win.
You all are very good advocates, but I'm wondering if you are also asking the community at large to advocate for community compost and some of these other things. If maybe that could be in the Beachcomber article.
Yes, thank you. Yes, we
That's what
are.
I suggested.
Yes, we are. And we operate on a shoestring budget, and we need to seriously increase that because we're now in a situation where, among other things, we're in a situation where we can get matching funds, but if we have no funds to match with,
Yeah,
we
but
have
are you
nothing to
suggesting
leverage. So-
just like maybe in your articles or letter to the editor or something, information, who could we write to King County and say we would like to have our own compost? Is that what you're suggesting? Just to
Something
start
like
putting
that. There
public
could also
pressure?
be like online petitions.
Yeah.
There could be all sorts of.
I personally would encourage you, if you have an issue with the transfer station, please write us a letter. Please send it to Zero Waste Vashon, zerowastevashon.org. We will in turn advocate and take it to King County. And please do the same thing. We'd love to have those letters to the
To
editor.
have the letters go through you and then you pass them on?
Yeah.
Well,
But feel free to write your own letters to the editor.
Yeah,
You don't need our
absolutely.
permission for that. Those are great, so go
but
for
we
it.
don't know who to write to in King County.
Yeah, we can
That's
help
what
you
I'm
with
saying.
that, that's true.
But
And if you write it to the Beachcomber, we'll make sure they get that too.
But at the transfer station, are you all also doing the fabric cloth box, or is that a separate?
That's a different organization.
That's terribly
We're supporting
organized.
them.
Right.
We support them and are willing to that, but they are working on independently.
I was there yesterday and I was shocked
What, that there was a lot or
at the
not?
fabric box.
Oh,
Well,
you
there was
had
a lot of
noticed-
stuff that wasn't fabric. There were piles of magazines and all sorts of stuff. It just somehow, some thought needs to be put to
Cleaning out my attic, this goes with it.
Where is that?
You run into that in all sorts of recycling.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Right. But that is an ongoing problem. We're trying to figure out what to do with the waste textiles at Vashon. There is not a spot for it to go, and so Zero Waste Vashon is working with Fibershed here on the island and looking at that waste stream. I mean, could we do, putting it down on rows and keeping weeds out instead of black plastic? But then if it's not 100% organic, then what do we, so we come to these points where, and who's going to sort it and all of that. So there are lots of issues, but we at Zero Waste as well as Vashon Fibershed are concerned that there's still too much going to the landfill. It's still a landfill glut that should not be there, and we don't have solutions in place for that right now. So again, if that's something that interests you, that's another, we don't have a separate group working on that, but that would be wonderful.
One possibility is to just have a kiosk at the recycling thing, and it is for general fabric, not usable clothes, like that, but general fabric, because that can be turned in, picked up and turned into shop wax.
And that's,
Well, that's what they're
that's
doing.
actually
That's
what the
what they have
transfer
in place.
station
Yeah.
bin
But
is.
it's more than, Granny still has so much that when I talk to grannies, they say, we can't take it all there. We would shut down the operation. King County won't let us take all of the textile waste fiber that we have, that is soiled and torn and all those things.
Relating to that, when you go to the transfer station, that box that takes the fabrics says on it, usable clothing. But I know from what I've been told in the newspaper, they will take all textiles.
Right.
So it's very
That
misleading.
signage needs to be
That
changed.
signage needs
Yeah,
to be
it needs
changed.
attention.
Because I was gonna bring some and thought, oh, I can't put this fabric in there that isn't usable clothing, because it says usable clothing only.
Great point.
It's got to be changed.
Write us, please.
Write that
us an
down,
email.
right. We might, one of us might lose that, but write that down.
And
send
the
it
other
to
problem
us.
is that they're not doing pickups frequently enough. When we went there, basically it was
Yeah.
there was bags all on the side, on
Yeah.
top,
Right.
and it was like that, it was raining and all things.
So much of what we're talking about is education based.
Right, absolutely.
And how do we cut to the chase to provide a simple message? And worldwide, fabrics are the second most polluting industry in the world, second only to the oil. And so
You mean
hopefully we educate ourselves to
in the
provide
making of
an
them?
awareness where we start buying 100% organic fabric because we can do something with that.
Michael, did you have a question?
I have a bit of a question about the digester, and I think you answered a lot of it because you're doing the study and you don't need to tell me. But maybe what I'll say is, in their study, are they looking at, well, I'll back up. I'm a big fan of digesters. But are they going to look at maybe whether other options, maybe a digester might not be the best option? Is that a possibility that they're going to look
Indeed,
at that?
possibility. That's the responsibility of feasibility.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, you know,
Absolutely.
in Europe, and let's say in Asia, they would be doing Takashi.
Maybe the best way is the biggest worm farm in the world.
Okay.
Right.
We need
So
to
that's
go.
why we didn't just leap off
What
the
did you
cliff
say?
into one
What
solution.
did you just
We're
say,
still-
Kim? Maybe the best, what did you just say to me?
Would be to provide the biggest worm farm in the world.
Oh,
The Vashon Worm Farm, can you see it now? Ken, did you have a question?
Okay, what scale are you talking about as far as a composting facility, and what's your roadmap? What are you gonna do to achieve that goal? What's your steps?
The scale is a part of that feasibility. We're still determining how much compost we import onto the island, because that's a measuring factor. And how much yard waste, food waste, brown waste logically could go to aerobic composting. So that's very much a part of the feasibility study, because we have to realistically scale whatever we do, assuming we do something. So it's a bit early. And we have started collecting data specific toward all of this. We've done 50 business waste surveys on the island, and it's fascinating to see the potential waste to resource. But the quantity is such a big issue.
Your question is really a good one, though. And it's exactly right. And we are just now getting into strategic studies on like that. So feasibility is a component, zoning becomes a component, financing becomes a component like that. And that's what we'll be doing this winter, essentially, is laying that roadwork of how do we make this so. We're just starting on that. I mean, this year we have been completely, immersed in the Waste to Garden project and this event series project. And we're talking a small group of people who are sort of dedicated working with that. So again, these are places where people are good at grant writing, if they're good essentially at looking at this. These are voluntary efforts that can also help. So because we are just embarking on that setting a roadmap for it.
And in that feasibility process, we will continue to develop the process, the concept, therefore, and start to attach financial figures as to maybe what we can anticipate in bulk. We have to attach a realistic figure as to what the product is worth on island. So there's a whole lot to be done, but that's exactly why we're in the feasibility phase.
And then we have to hear back from the community. Because there are ideas that maybe, it's something that works together with the land trust on the pseudo park. And it becomes more of a closed loop system. I mean, in a perfect world, I'd like to be able to go into the Swiftway and buy organic produce that came from on island. So if you're talking a cogenerative facility that maybe heating, making biochar or whatever, and heating a greenhouse facility like that. So there's a lot of options, but it's going to take community participation and desire to make it work.
There are a lot of co-action items happening simultaneously, such as Viga is looking at, they got feasibility money to study the concept of a food hub for Vashon Island. The Land Trust has some land, and there's some other land that may be potential for a small farmer or 5 or 10 to be able to work within that food hub. So we turn up the production. But I think that really so much of what we're wrestling with here is the true value of something, okay? If we can always get it at island lumber for less than we can produce it, how do we value that? How do we balance that out? When is a local job more important than a Home Depot prices? And I think that this is really important because it goes all the way across the board, because we can't talk about environmental economics unless we talk about a more true value for our product.
So you mentioned the landfill. And it's great that we've gone 3 times the recycling tonnage. How much has the landfill tonnage changed in the last 3 years?
Landfill's been closed for a long, long while.
But I mean, not on island, but stuff taken off island.
Right, stuff going to.
The landfill waste,
The
generally.
landfill waste. So, we're recycling 3 times as much, but are we seeing a change in the stuff going to the landfill?
Yes, we're seeing obviously more trash. As we can commingle, then that helps to allow somebody to throw, their plastic, their metal, their paper, their cardboard into one bin and then their garbage into the other. As we can change that throughout our island, then we definitely see our recycle rates go up, as we've seen in the transfer station, and less garbage. And it's a big concern for King County Solid Waste, because we as a county, in order to be able to make our landfill last until 2040, we've got to start pulling up our overall recycle to waste rates substantially up. King County has got a 70% target rate across the county for recycle, and therefore 30% towards garbage. And we're at about 51, 52%.
That's what I was wondering. We're 51%.
And then you start looking at our weaknesses. We're better than 50% residential. We're 27% business, commercial. And this sucks, okay? This will floor you. We are 9% in multifamily.
Oh, wow.
9% recycling. What are we building right now in our county?
All right, but you
Multifamily housing.
I heard you explain about that multifamily, that's that truck business that comes and picks things up, right? And sometimes gets bored with going up the hill there and goes over to Tacoma and dumps it all, right? Is that true? Is that
That's
the
where our
problem?
hauler, Waste Connections, takes the recycle to their facility in Tacoma.
So that's all the people or small business, multifamily, who put out their stuff on the sidewalk is picked up by this company. Is this correct?
That's only residential.
On this island, yes.
Yeah, but isn't
On
that
this island?
Yes.
Yeah. So
But
is that a big reason why that number is so low?
there's a number of reasons. And I own a couple of apartments on the island, and it's been my own personal experiment to try and figure out what works and what doesn't work. Part of the frustration, as far as recycles go, is the transfer station will take glass as a part of their commingle. Our hauler will not. Our hauler dictates that the glass goes into the garbage. Okay? And that same thing is happening with our business, because our businesses, our commercial accounts, because it's the same hauler. Vashon Disposal is owned by Waste Connections, and that's the residential arm. That's who services haul-wise residentially throughout the island. The commercial is Murray's Disposal. Murray's Disposal is also owned by Waste Connections. So they're both owned by the same parent company. Waste Connections is the second largest waste processor in the United States. So part of the problem is that we don't have a uniform collection system on the island, and that really makes things confusing. And ideally, in the process of doing this, we pull up our collection systems so they're simpler and people know what to do with their batteries. I didn't know what to do with small batteries. You know, you can take them over to True Value or to Vashon Motor Parts and Ace, and they collect them and do the right things with them. CFL bulbs, really pretty nasty stuff, not typical landfill. You can take it to PSE, and you can take it to our transfer station now. But that doesn't mean that it's gotten any more simple, right? So I think that it goes back to having a uniform collection system. Ideally, we as a rural community figure out how to do what Seattle's doing, so that everybody that comes and goes on the boat knows that there's like 3 bins, right? Hopefully we can reach that here. Then we'll really start to, and back to multifamily, part of the problem is legislative. We legislate that we have to have so many parking spaces, but we don't legislate to new multifamily areas that you have to provide a commingle facility, you have to provide a recycle area, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
For the trial with the yard waste that was going into the covered area, what happened to the yard waste?
It went over to Cedar Grove and got made into compost.
Oh, okay, it was sent off island.
So it did complete a loop, but it had a truck and it went somewhere else and we have to buy it back.
In plastic bags.
Yeah, bagged up.
All right.
Right. But it did not go into the landfill. Well, we seem to be kind of drawing to a close here. I want to thank you all for coming and realizing that you are a wonderful core group of people. But think about your neighbors who ought to know about our work or have some special skills that you think could help us. Please tell them to look at our website, look at our Facebook, and get in touch with us, because we need a wider community. So thank you all for your.
Thank you.
Thank you.